Why, hello there. The Blasphemous True Torment update and Mea Culpa DLC come out on October 31st, and I got to play early. The True Torment update is a free update that adds a ton of new stuff to the base game, from quality of life improvements, new enemies, big changes to the map, new prayers, rosary beads, figures, and a new game plus mode. The Mea Culpa expansion is a paid DLC that adds 2 massive new areas, new NPCs, new bosses, more new prayers, beads, and statues, new achievements, the Mea Culpa sword, and maybe most importantly, new tracks from Carlos Viola. If that sounds like a lot, it's because it is, and there's a lot to talk about. In this spoiler-free review, I'm going to give my thoughts and impressions about the new content, which for me was resoundingly positive on the whole, with one big disappointment. Before jumping in, consider hitting the subscribe button to get more reviews and Blasphemous content. With that out of the way, let's get into it. First, let's talk about the True Torment update, which is free and everyone will be getting it on October 31st. The first change with the True Torment update happens before you even get into the game, with a couple of nice quality of life additions. The ability to duplicate saves has been added, along with the ability to toggle on and off the UI. Getting into the game, there have been so many major and minor changes to the world. The base game map has seen additions and changes to the geometry of the world in most areas in the form of expansions to areas and new connections between areas. In addition, there have also been a few visual overhauls to some areas. The Choir of Thorns and Labyrinth of Tides, formerly interstitial spaces, are now full zones. New enemies and tweaked enemy encounters are also sprinkled across the map, with some areas like the 2 mentioned previously in Crimson Reigns receiving surprisingly large overhauls to the enemy placement and encounters. Of particular note to me, I was delighted to see the addition of unique executions to some existing enemies. While I'd love to see more, those added are very good and take a big step toward the gory glory of Blasphemous 1 executions. There are also 2 new platforming elements added to the world. The first is breakable glass platforms previously seen in the Miriam challenges in Blasphemous 1. The glass platforms will immediately break until you gain a new ability that lets you stand on them very briefly before breaking. These are fine, functioning primarily as a gate and to add some variety to more complicated platforming challenges. On a small side note, gaining an ability or weapon now has a small animated cutscene that plays. This is a different studio than Sunshine, who did the animated cutscenes in Blasphemous 2's base game. But stylistically, I'm still not a huge fan of them, and I'm not really a fan of getting more cutscenes that break from the strong aesthetic of the game. The other new platforming element are these green toggles that turn green platforms, wall grabs, and walls tangible or intangible. I really like the addition of these elements, and they're used in cool and creative ways in both the True Torment update and the Mea Culpa DLC that add more variety to the already really solid platforming of Blasphemous 2. The new prayers, beads, and figures are all nice, with the rosary beads adding in some non-elemental defense beads to mix things up and are useful in True Torment mode. Speaking of True Torment mode, the new game plus mode in Blasphemous 2 is my biggest disappointment with the added content. Like Blasphemous 1, after beating the base game, you have the option to ascend your file to New Game Plus. After doing so, New Game Plus starts, and near the beginning of the game there is an altar where you can choose penances to add to your run. In Blasphemous 2, there are 8 difficulty modifiers, and you can select any number of them. These difficulty modifiers include things like stronger enemies, insta-kill spikes, restrictions on upgrades, and Penitente's health being converted into orbs. Based on a mixture of type and quantity, this will raise your retribution level. If you complete a run with these modifiers on, you get some special rewards that will carry over between runs. This is all good. The modifiers are largely similar to those from Blasphemous 1 with a few additions, and getting to mix and match between them creates some really interesting challenges. Unfortunately, I had some bugs with this mode that were resolved too late to finish my run, in which I foolishly took all of the modifiers, but I did have fun taking on the now much more dangerous world of Blasphemous 2. What makes Blasphemous 2's True Torment mode disappointing for me is that nothing carries over between New Game and New Game Plus. In Blasphemous 1, in True Torment mode, you would retain prayers, rosary beads, abilities, and Mea Culpa skills. Your health and fervor upgrades would be reset, but you could go through the game with your full kit, allowing for new sequences through the world and your full arsenal to mess around with and throughout the entire run. In Blasphemous 2, you can't do any of that, making it feel more like New Game again than New Game Plus. You do have the modifiers, which are interesting, but why gate this challenge mode behind a completed New Game if nothing from New Game carries over into New Game Plus? I can see needing to beat the game once to unlock this mode, but after that, why not let any new game be a true Torment run? It feels a bit ironic to me that the reward, the intrinsic value placed on the true Torment mode, is getting items that carry over, acknowledging that the fun of subsequent runs is having items that carry over, while eliminating the most interesting ones between runs. I haven't completed a run, so I can't speak on what these rewards are, but I did confirm with the game kitchen that you will not be able to keep weapons, skills, prayers, figures between runs except for the rewards for completing a true Torment run. I was looking forward to taking my 100% file and getting to use Mea Culpa from the start, but as it stands, ascending that file will wipe away my 100% item collection and I'll have to make it through a sizable portion of the game to get Mea Culpa again, and that's a bummer. There might be a technical reason why they couldn't provide access to all weapons and abilities from the start, and in Mea Culpa's case it does get a little wonky with the story, but ultimately that's just conjecture and I can only judge what's on the table. Like I said, the penances in Blasphemous 2's True Torment mode are cool, just like they were cool in Blasphemous 1. But Blasphemous 1 also set a precedent for how this mode could function, and what we've gotten in Blasphemous 2, while interesting, just isn't as good. So while True Torment mode disappointed, the update on the whole is really impressive and adds a lot to Blasphemous 2. The Game Kitchen set a high standard for their post-release support with Blasphemous 1's DLCs, and this update follows in that tradition, showing a level of care and dedication to their games that I find very endearing. Now let's talk about the Mea Culpa DLC. I played through it twice. The first time around it took about 6 hours to play through the DLC content, and then I subsequently breezed through it in about 3 hours. Not to sound like a shill, but if you're watching this in the first couple weeks and haven't picked up the DLC yet, it has a 20% discount right now, and assuming you're a fan of Blasphemous 2, you'll want to grab this. The Mea Culpa DLC features 2 new areas that are expansive, visually striking, and really well designed. Blasphemous 2 already had good platforming in the base game, but they kicked it up a notch in the DLC. Between the new platforming elements mentioned before and the additional ability introduced with the Mea Culpa, the DLC has the best platforming sections in Blasphemous 2. Another element that tops the base game are the combat arenas. I'm on the record as not really loving combat arenas in Metroidvanias because I think they're often a bit dull compared to regular enemy encounters that are more thoughtfully integrated into level geometry, in which you can tactically approach on your own terms. Blasphemous 2's base game had a lot of combat arenas which were generally fine, but still not my favorite aspect of the game. That being said, the combat arenas in the DLC are quite good. The geometry and shape of these arenas are much more dynamic and make great use of platforming to make these encounters interesting. Some of the arenas are pretty large, giving you more tactical options in how to approach a given scenario, while also acting as a required challenge to progress. It helps that the enemy mixtures work really well together and feel crafted to work in the arenas in which they're featured. The combat continues to shine in the boss fights, which challenged me to consider my loadout and test my skills to overcome the fights as a combination of considerate preparation and competent execution. While there are technically 2 boss characters as described in the marketing, this is a slightly conservative number compared to the actual number of boss fights, and I find it refreshing that they actually undersold it a bit. Speaking of characters, the NPCs and story of the Mea Culpa DLC are great. Blasphemous 2 lacks some of the personal confrontations that Blasphemous 1 had with Esdras and Escribar, who would get small cutscenes at regular intervals and build up pathos and tension. This approach returns in the Mea Culpa DLC, which features the most fully realized characters in the game. And that includes the eponymous Mea Culpa itself. The DLC is very canny in building out the legendary weapon from Blasphemous 1, while also keeping it from Penitente's grasp for a surprising portion of the DLC, building tension around receiving the weapon and then cashing in on that tension to great effect. I'm not going to spoil the story around Mea Culpa, but I do want to talk broadly about how it functions and fits into the arsenal of weapons in Blasphemous 2. If you want to skip this, use the chapters function to move ahead to my final thoughts. In a DLC predictions video, I spoke about how a much less interesting version of Mea Culpa would be for it to be a remix of the Blasphemous 1 Mea Culpa, as it would essentially be redundant alongside the 3 Blasphemous 2 weapons that all borrow aspects from it. In that video, I was both right and wrong. Mea Culpa in Blasphemous 2 does largely have the same moveset from Blasphemous 1, making it essentially a combination of the 3 Blasphemous 2 weapons. While I would have loved something wholly new, this remix of the first game's sole weapon was still a lot of fun to use. It takes the place of Ruego al Alba in the weapon lineup, which can be toggled between the two by holding down the left bumper. It also takes Ruega Al Alba's function of using a plunging attack to break the meat walls throughout the world. However, the Game Kitchen also found a clever way to add another platforming element to Mea Culpa in the form of a remixed Fervorous Blood, the ranged attack for the Mea Culpa from Blasphemous 1. While Bleeding Miracle replaced it as a prayer, the Mea Culpa in Blasphemous 2 comes equipped with a very similar Fervorous Blood style ranged attack with the first swing of a combo that will fire off again upon starting a new combo. This not only functions in combat, but can also be used to teleport and boost through thorny barriers around the world by pressing the right bumper while the projection of Penitente passes beyond. I'm a sucker for a multifaceted ability, and while this is so useful in combat, it's even more fun as a platforming tool. This extra wrinkle to the platforming is used in some really cool ways in both platforming challenges and the combat arenas. Without this, I think Mea Culpa is fun but a little stale, but this element adds something fresh to the Mea Culpa that makes it more than just a remix. The Blasphemous 2 Mea Culpa DLC is the first paid DLC for Blasphemous, and it is well worth it for both the quality of the content and for supporting more DLCs, which feel imminent based on the stuff at the end of the DLC that I certainly won't be talking about in this review. It features the best platforming in the game, top tier bosses, and a really good story that has me wanting more. And there you have it, the True Torment update in Mea Culpa DLC for Blasphemous 2. Between the two, there is a remarkable amount of new content, and content that feels new after the overhauls in the update. True Torment mode failed to meet expectations, but there are still cool challenges to take on within the penances. I fully plan on continuing to learn how much tougher Choir of Thorns is when Spike's insta-kill and you have 3 health orbs after finishing this review. The Mea Culpa DLC feels like Blasphemous 2 at its best across the board, taking the familiar and making it feel fresh. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Let me know in the comments your plans for the release of this content on October 31st. Are you going to start a new game again run and experience the new content with added challenges? Or do you want to pick up where you left off and get right into the Mea Culpa DLC? There has never been a better time to check out Blasphemous 2 content, and I will surely be making more of it in the coming weeks and months, and of course have a hearty backlog of all things Blasphemous already on the channel. Please subscribe to the channel for more Blasphemous content if that sounds good to you. Thanks for watching.